Before we begin, I'm trying to reach 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year to make all these special videos, so if you like the content here, please consider subscribing to help fulfill Project 10K. Thank you. Now on to the video. With the launch of Cars 3 in 2017, we got a wide variety of merchandise themed around its demolition derby scene. And that makes perfect sense. Kids love being able to smash and crash around their toy cars, and smashing and crashing cars is literally the purpose of that scene. It's a demolition derby. So of course we got a ton of merchandise based on it. And while we don't get Demolition Derby products nearly as much as we did back in 2017 or so, we still have a pretty wide catalog of Demolition Derby items out there, and a lot of them make some pretty interesting choices. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Weird Products, a series where I take a look at some of the weirdest Disney Cars products I can find, and today we're going to be talking all about Demolition Derby items, so let's get started. In 2017, the Demolition Derby had an entire toy line themed around it, with the Crazy 8 Crashers. These were plastic cars that typically came in packs of 2, alongside 2 accessories. The line had several waves and released nearly all of the Demolition Derby cars from Cars 3. Now you might be wondering, Ty, why are you pointing this out? This looks pretty normal to me. What's so weird about this? What's weird about this? Well, you see those wheels? You know, wheels, a thing that all cars have that makes them roll? Yeah, they don't roll. They are static plastic pieces that are just molded into each of the car's bases. Instead of giving these guys 4 functional wheels, they instead decided to put one rubber wheel on the base, attaching it to this strange spinning apparatus that moves around in all sorts of directions, so when you push the car on the ground, it slides around in whatever way it was pushed. This allowed the cars to drift a bit more than regular toy cars would. They have this kind of very floaty movement, so when you knock one into each other, it might switch directions or go in a different way instead of just stopping or maybe being pushed back a little. You could have a lot of weird, crazy crashes with these. It just always really stood out to me that they made this choice with the wheels. It's honestly really fascinating technology. Another toy line made for the Demolition Derby were the Crunch and Crash cars. These were large-scale plastic cars. They released several. Miss Fritter, RV, Dr. Damage, and I believe a Mr. Drippy was cancelled. These items are pretty simple. As you can see, they look like pretty normal plastic cars items, but if you look closely, you can see that they're actually segmented into 3 separate parts. These 3 segments will warp the shape of the car when you crash them into a wall or just crash them with your hand. Wow, look at that beautiful product photo. It really feels like somebody's hand is actually there. Once the cars are crashed, not only do their eyes close, but they fully change shape, being warped like this, and they can no longer roll. Until you fix them with your real human hands that are definitely really there and really holding RV. Of the 3 they made, I think Dr. Damage is my personal favorite when crashed. He looks pretty good, and he's the only one that doesn't look like a stretching cat. Mr. Drippy, meanwhile, was actually supposed to crunch to the side, pretty similar to the other crash damage toy line that was out at this time, Racin' Wreck, which has the most unrealistic crash damage I've ever seen on a Cars toy. Look at this. Dude looks like a Twizzler. Our final crashing toy for today comes from the Disney Store, the beautifully named Thunder Hollow Crazy 8's Demolition 3-pack Crash Set. You guys couldn't have come up with a less clunky title there? This pack includes Chester Whipplefilter, Dr. Damage, and T-Bone. Now you might notice that T-Bone is not T-Bone shaped. This is something that bothered me for years and was actually one of the main inspirations behind me making this video. I had to talk about this weird T-Bone. Well, in my research for this video, I finally learned that this T-Bone does become the correct shape when you crash him. As when he collides with the surface, part of his body swivels to make him the right shape. That's right, folks, it's my favorite game, Damage the Toy Car to make it more film accurate.
Mission failed. We'll get him next time.
If you want to get technical, this is actually something we see happen to T-Bone in the movie, and it's actually a pretty fun idea for a toy of him. I just kind of feel bad for the guy. It seems like he's in a perpetual loop of this always happening. And now, his fate is in your hands. Speaking of which, if you want to crash him again, all you have to do is reset him, and then put him into the... Ew! Why is that launcher so long? Ugh! Why does it feed through the entire body of the car? Was that really necessary? Excessively long launchers aside, Dr. Damage and Chester Ripple Filter both have pretty cool features when you crash them. Dr. Damage has some panels that pop out, McQueen's eyes change, and he actually has some built-in sounds, which the other characters don't have. There's also a cruise, and I just now learned that she came packed with a Miss Fritter as well as a Thunder Hollow sign. I don't really care about the Miss Fritter, unless she looks like this when I crash her. As the most significant Demolition Derby character and one of the most heavily promoted new characters in Cars 3, Miss Fritter has a lot of her own merchandise. For example, this plush. By the time of Cars 3, they pretty much mastered how to make plushes that looked like the Cars characters. With some exceptions, of course. But Miss Fritter is not one of those exceptions. This plush of her looks really good. It's very well designed, and it's packed with detail that makes the likeness to the character pretty much perfect. From the horns being additional sewn-on pieces, to the graffiti and number on the sides, even the chain attached to her nose is there. They did a really good job with this, and I love her expression. It looks so annoyed. This Miss Fritter is actually quite a bit smaller than I expected her to be, and she comes from a pretty extensive line of Cars 3 plushes called the Crash'ems, which would speak if you crashed them. So they're basically the spiritual successor to the Smack-and-Yaks. But remember about a minute ago when I mentioned that some Cars 3 plushes still looked off? Well, what if I told you that Miss Fritter came from the exact same line as these guys? How does she look so good and then the rest of them look so off? I can only assume it's because of her shaping. Miss Fritter is a lot more squared off than these characters, and if you look at Cruz, McQueen, and Jackson, they're all a bit too round, so yeah, I can only assume that Miss Fritter being a bit more box-shaped meant that it was easier for them to make her accurate. Probably the weirdest Miss Fritter item on this list is the official Hallmark ornament of her. I actually spoke about this when I did a Weird Products holiday special back in 2022, but I knew this video wouldn't be complete without me bringing it up. It's an ornament of Miss Fritter, it's highly detailed, done by Hallmark, their ornaments are always incredible looking. And not just that, it actually has a button that you can press, and it delivers lines of Miss Fritter dialogue. Just lines from the movie, nothing like holiday related or anything like that. Like a lot of Hallmark ornaments, they just have it be themed to a character without it necessarily being themed to the holiday season. But to me, the weirdest thing about this item is the fact that it wasn't released until 2019. Most Demolition Derby merchandise came out in 2017 to coincide with the release of Cars 3, and we haven't really gotten much since then, with the exception of the Cars diecast line re-releasing Demolition Derby racers every year. So while usually it doesn't seem strange when a Cars character gets a new piece of merchandise several years after their movie came out, in the case of Miss Fritter, this just seems kind of dated to me. Like, it's kind of weird to see a big new Miss Fritter product dropping 2 years after most Miss Fritter merchandise came out, when not much else is coming out to this day. But considering at the time Hallmark was only doing one Cars ornament a year, I guess it makes sense that it took until 2019 to get to Miss Fritter. On the subject of 2019 Miss Fritter merchandise, I was shocked to find this children's shirt advertising Miss Fritter's Racing School. That's the name of the racing school she opens up in that super forgotten about short included with the Blu-ray of Cars 3. I could not believe that they made a shirt that references this short. School is even spelt wrong in the exact same way. I think that's so cool, and it's so funny to have a shirt that makes it look like you attended her racing school. But the fact that it references the racing school isn't the only weird thing about this shirt. Equally strange to me is the fact that they decided to use the render of Miss Fritter made for her XRS release. For those of you who might not know, when the XRS Mud Racers diecast line first started in 2019, they released a line of deluxes. Since the race and universe takes place at Thunder Hollow, they decided to have Miss Fritter, RV, and also Mater take part in it. This shirt is, for whatever reason, using the XRS Miss Fritter render. Note her larger wheels and the mouthguard around her bumper. That's why at the start of this segment, I mentioned that it was a 2019 item. And while I don't have official confirmation on that, it certainly couldn't have come out before 2019 because, well, that's when XRS Miss Fritter released. But this gets even weirder, because instead of just using a regular generic Cars logo, they decided to use a Cars 3 logo here. So this is now a Cars 3 t-shirt, an XRS t-shirt, and a Miss Fritters Racing School, the minute-and-a-half-long short t-shirt. I could not believe that this was official at first, but all signs pointed to the fact that it was. It's so weird, and honestly, so cool. This is so cool. If this were made in adult sizes, I would totally buy it. I wouldn't wear it in public, but I'd buy it. But if you want a Miss Fritter shirt in adult sizes, you could get this one that says Crush 'em and features Miss Fritter and McQueen. Or this one that uses the exact same artwork as the Crush 'em shirt, minus McQueen, and says Fritter Time instead. Man, I really need to do a Weird Products t-shirt edition. And on the subject of Fritter Time, I looked all over the place for a Miss Fritter clock. I thought that would be hilarious, and I did find some, but unfortunately none of them were official. This one on eBay is definitely a custom one. They have several other clocks that simply just take an image of a character and sell it as a clock. So, no, there's no real Fritter Time clock. And finally, to wrap up this video, we have a Demolition Derby toy line that's confused me ever since I first saw it back in 2017. Meet the Chompin' Chase. This toy line featured plastic versions of Miss Fritter, Dr. Damage, Arvy, and Mr. Drippy. Released in the spring of 2017 to coincide with Cars 3, these Demolition Derby cars had the strange feature of opening and closing their mouth as they rolled, what the box labeled as chomping action, so that they can chomp and chase. You see what they did there? But even back in 2017, I never understood why these existed. Yes, they are big, scary cars with these big, scary mouths. At least they're supposed to look scary. I can't stop laughing at these. But the problem comes from the premise of the toy. The chomping action and the chomp and chase feature implies that Miss Fritter and the other Demolition Derby racers are trying to eat cars. Having monster car toys that could eat other cars is something that you see all the time with Hot Wheels, and Cars merchandise has done it a few times with the Screamin' Banshee and the Tyrannosaurus Rex in 2022. So I understand wanting to do this concept with toy cars, but the concept of applying it to the Demolition Derby racers is absolutely crazy to me. It really comes down as a case where they saw the characters, said, yes, we know how to make a toy out of these. They're big, angry, evil monster cars. Have them try to eat the other cars, and just ran with it. Now, of course, these can't actually eat other cars' toys. The mouths are simply not big enough for that. And when you see these guys in action, their mouths definitely come off as sort of laughing or taunting, maybe not trying to eat, but still, the usage of the word chomp in the name of the toy and just the all-around concept is so strange to me, and I just really don't get what the intention here was, if it wasn't to make it look like they're trying to eat the cars. And there you have it, guys, some of the weirdest Demolition Derby products that I could find. There's surprisingly a lot out there for these guys, but like I said in the intro, I guess it makes sense. Kids love toys that can smash and crash and apparently eat each other. Or, sorry, these don't actually eat each other, they just open and close their mouths aggressively. Anyway, guys, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye now.